Professor Dr. if I may, Christopher Lubogo. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. How do we talk democracy in a country like Uganda? What exactly are we even talking about?
Well, let's first of all understand what is democracy. Democracy is like a prism that refracts light in terms of human aspirations, particularly in terms of their culture, in terms of power, but also in terms of history, that castigate or eventually form what they call a clandestine. Now, for you to understand what democracy is, you may want to understand a little bit of the history of the terminology democracy. Democracy, first of all, comes from the word demos crotoris. Now, demos means people, and then crotoris means rule of law. So we're talking about democratia, meaning the power of the people, which obviously has its root, first of all, in Greek mythology, but also in terms of Roman revolutions, particularly people like Montesquieu, who argued in the spirit of the laws and argued that democracy had to do with what? Separation of powers, the three arms of government. Like Professor Kanyahamba usually says, 3 stones that make a beautiful meal.
Now, those who crafted democracy, did they have Africa in mind that has a very strong background of chiefdoms and monarchies?
Beautiful question. I also want to invoke another Professor Makandula from University of Dar es Salaam said that these monarchs are simply revolving bandits or stationary bandits who actually exercise power at the mercies of the innocent people. So democracy could mean different things under different jurisdictions.
And what does that mean in a country like ours, where people have very strong allegiances to their chiefdoms and monarchies, but also want elections and freedom of speech?
The problem we have in our country, I've talked about it in my book called Demystifying the Order from Above, and also Demystifying the Executive Mandate, Constitutional Mandate, is the fusion of these 3 arms of government. How I wish we had the 3 separation of power. I think it was Abraham Lincoln who first brought that into order when he said what democracy would import or would mean, number 1, for the people, by the people, of the people. And those are elements that we need to comprehend even as we exercise this so-called democracy.
With the level of literacy where it is in Africa, is it possible, A, to grow democracy and B, to appreciate it?
Yes, depending on which school of thought you subscribe to. Because democracy has got different interpretations, as I say. We have different levels of democracy also. So depending on the kind of democracy we're talking about, the biggest challenge we have as a nation in our country is that we are so much affected by what they call the hubris syndrome. Now, the hubris syndrome actually leads to what they call nemesis. And that is the biggest struggle that we have as a democracy in our country.
Professor, thank you so much. You see, the viewers are not here, so we cannot have an election on whether to continue the interview or not. So I'm going to be dictatorial and end the interview. But thank you so much for coming.